And sometimes I will just show up to a situation not putting myself in the right space of mind. And I'll just do that. I'll stay really superficial. And I'll think that it's easier for me to do that, to just let the police be there and then to act in my safe zone. I don't realize in the moment that actually it's taking me a lot of energy. And it's also taking away that stuff, as you're saying, that actually creates a lot of energy for me. Like if I was to dive in and connect with somebody, that would make me feel more alive. That would make me feel more energetic. So kind of going with this error in thinking that like, oh, I'm gonna let the police be here. I'm gonna stay superficial and keep myself safe. But actually, it's that false safety that actually steals a lot more than me, rather than the true safety of I'm going to show up in my integrity and I'm going to do what feels right to me. If something goes wrong along the way, I've got my own back. Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Becc.
And I am Kristeen Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Dr. Becc is a mindset coach and medical doctor who specialises in liberating driven, professional women from the limitations of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and people pleasing. She's basically the cheat code for getting out of your own way, showing up authentically, and living a life you're proud of.
And Kristeen is a medical educator and nephrologist who creates resources for doctors in training that I truly think are an unfair advantage. She makes complex topics super simple and takes the pain and uncertainty out of passing your medical exams. Kristeen and I connected a few years ago via our online platforms, and over the years we've discussed countless highs, lows, and in-betweens of doctor life. And in doing so, we've experienced firsthand the power of vulnerable conversations to show us where we're getting in our own way and underestimating our capacity.
So we want you to be part of the conversation and experience these same results. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors.
What's going on? You would.
I said, hey, yeah. Yeah, sorry guys, this is my Monday afternoon version of me.
Never apologize. I vote for more singing on the podcast.
I think we'd lose a lot of subscribers.
Speaking of, we have a podcast review that we want to shout out because we are so delighted with this review, and we're so grateful that you came on to just take time out of your day to write a nice thing. So awesome. So this is from Doc CT Scanner. Good on you for doing radiology. My brain doesn't work in patterns and pictures like that as much as I would need it to. This show is both humble and a well thought out discussion. It is so important for us all to talk about the issues we face as doctors so we can find ways to avoid burnout and serve our patients and ourselves. Doc CT Scanner gets it. And just a super loving invitation for any of you guys. You don't need to leave us a review. We would love it if you left us a review, don't get me wrong. But more than anything, we just love to hear from you. We want to hear if these experiences and the stuff that we talk about resonates, or if you have anything to add. So many of you guys will have clever tips and strategies and coping skills to get through this kind of weird doctor life that we do. And also questions. We just love to hear what you guys want to hear us talk about, because we're doing our best to talk about the things that make us uncomfortable. And I tell you what, if you were like, can you please talk about this? Even if we were like, we'd do it, wouldn't we, Kristeen?
We definitely would. Although I must say, I feel like I'm a hot mess. I don't feel like I ever run out of things to talk about in terms of my own personal struggles. So yeah, but it'd be nice to hear about other people's. So yeah.
I thought I was being super poetic the other day when I was like, a good life is an obstacle course. I was like, oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. But that's what I feel like. I feel like life is just constantly an obstacle course. I think before I got into, like, when I was a wee child, as Kristeen would say, when I was a wee 18-year-old, I think I really thought that once I got through medical school and I became a doctor, like, that'd be like, I would have ticked the boxes for life. And after then it'll just be like cruising, maintaining. But it's an obstacle course.
And that can be fun, right? Like, you know, there's like joy in getting through each obstacle, I guess. So how's everyone's obstacle course going? And I guess that brings us to today's episode. So we really hope you love this and resonate with this. So Becc had a beautiful concept today, which is about those police in your life. Who are the police in your life? So do you want to tell us a bit more, Becc?
Yeah, and this concept is so important. To me, I feel like it's something that's actually fundamental to this group program, that this group coaching membership that I'm going to be opening in just a few weeks. The doors will be open, guys. And, this group coaching membership is all around, centered around helping successful women feel more safe in their lives so that you can be more daring again. And specifically in that order, the idea of no pain, no gain, and sort of if you want to do excellent things, you just have to feel afraid and go out there and do the best that you can while you're absolutely shaking in your boots. It is true to some extent, but I think successful people, certainly the successful women that I worked with and a lot of the successful doctors that I know, I think we take those concepts a little bit too far. I think a lot of us believe that, to really live an extraordinary life and to do extraordinary things, that it's going to be all pain, and that you have to be willing to feel a lot of fear to do those things. And therefore, a lot of us, we just count ourselves out because we're like, well, I'm not willing to feel fear 99% of the time in my life. I'm actually not willing to do that. I actually want quality of life. I actually want to enjoy my life a bit. I want to smell the roses at some bit. I'm not going to sign up to 99% fear in order to do something excellent. And that would be a fair enough decision to make. However, the piece that is missing and the solution that we bring you with Dare Darling, when you come to Dare Darling and you get coached, is you learn how to feel less fear in the pursuit of doing hard things, in the pursuit of doing excellent things. I'm going to help you feel more safe doing things that once scared you. I'm going to change your relationship with fear, because for me in my life and the results that I've created, I used to try and use, grit and willpower and just pushing through the fears and the doubts and the insecurities, all those things. I used to just try and use force to create results. And through mind management, through coaching, I learned to create more safety in myself. It's the last thing I thought that would be the solution to creating better results for me. But creating safety in myself made me feel more brave. It made me look more brave in what I was doing. But actually, I wasn't being brave. I wasn't being courageous. I was able to feel more safe than the person standing next to me. And therefore, I had this unfair advantage of being able to feel safe while somebody else was suffering with fears and insecurities and stress that I just didn't have to work against. And Dare Darling is all about creating that same advantage for you too, that you probably never really knew was possible. So there is going to be a Dare Darling party, a pre-launch party before we actually have our very first call in the program. It is the How Dare You Darling party. And that'll be just in a couple of days before we actually open the group. And in the meantime, in today's episode, we're going to talk about this situation where I recently found myself feeling unsafe and therefore acting really weird and therefore expending a lot of energy and also missing out on having a good time because I was feeling unsafe. So in my last locum working in Victoria, I had become obsessed with this nearby town, Daylesford. So I'd gone to Daylesford one weekend and I was like, this place is the best place in the world. And by the end of my contract, I think I ended up on average going to this town like every second weekend or something crazy. So on just one of my drives, I was on my way to Daylesford, driving along, and suddenly in my rearview vision mirror, I recognized that the police were behind me. Before that, I was having the time of my life, singing along, just like gazing out the windows. Oh, what a beautiful place we live in. Oh, I can't wait to get to Daylesford. Oh, I'm having the best time ever. I'm so happy, relaxed and happy. Then seeing the police behind me, I almost like instantly, like my posture improved. I was like sitting up. I put my hands on 10 and 2. I I looked down at the speedometer. What speed am I going? Okay, very serious driver now. I'm going to Dalesford. I started doing this thing with my eyes as well. I was like minutes had passed like this, and I'd realized I was in my perfect posture, my hands on 10 and 2. My eyes were also doing this thing of going speedometer, review, road, speedometer, review, road, speedometer, review, road. And I swear it could have been like 10 minutes that had passed of just me being this perfect driver. Speedometer, review, road, speedometer, review, road, driving along, just rigid. And at some point, I got awareness and saw what I was doing in this situation. There was one point where I was like, oh my gosh, they're still there. Are you guys coming to Dalesford with me? What's going on? And with that, I suddenly heard myself and I was like, whoa, what are you doing? You've just spent the last 10 minutes driving like an absolute weirdo. Like, okay, it's sure, it might have been good road safety, 10 and 2 and speedometer, like do your little triangles, speedometer, road, review, fine. But for me, that's not the way that I normally drive. And it's not the way that I drive, that I need to drive safely either. Like, I'm actually quite a competent driver. I don't actually need to do all those extra little rigid things to drive well. And I just let out this, I actually just laughed when I realized I was doing it, because I was expending so much energy and being super weird, acting really different, driving differently than I usually would, just because the police were behind me. And then I started to relax. I turned my music back up. I remembered that actually the way that I drive, the police they wouldn't find me, or I wouldn't be doing anything wrong with the normal way that I drive. So I relaxed back into it once I realized what I was doing, and I finally started enjoying my drive again. But it was a really great analogy for me to realize that in so many places in my life, otherwise, I do this very same thing. I have, or I identify the police around me in some way, i.e., somebody who's capable, some authority who's capable of telling me you're doing it wrong. You're doing the wrong thing. You shouldn't have done that, especially with that kind of moral sort of tinge to it of being a bad citizen in society, I think. Realizing that I have that feeling, that extra level of vigilance, that extra level of tension and rigidity and sort of policing myself in so many other places in my life in the same way. And when I compare the way that I was driving before the police were behind me, where I was firstly driving safely, but secondly, driving in a totally relaxed way where my energy was just flowing and relaxed. And I was primed to get to Dalesford and have the best weekend ever. But then also really enjoying the drive, like singing or listening to audiobooks or all the other things that I do with my mind when I drive, when I'm actually relaxed and I don't actually need to use that extra level of focus to drive, because I am unconsciously competent at driving. It's not something that I need to use that extra level of attention to do. So seeing that contrast of all the things that I got from driving unpoliced, without the police in my life, compared to when the police were in my life, it just made me think, where else am I doing this in my life? Am I acting weird, actually probably driving less well and stealing a lot from myself in terms of energy and opportunity? So in today's episode, we wanted to bring this question to your mind as well, of who or where are the police in your life? Do you have anything that resonates with this, Kristeen?
Oh my goodness, all the time. It resonates so much. I mean, the police thing totally resonates. And the other thing that I do in that, I don't know if anyone else does this, this is a total tangent, but does anyone else do this when they're at the airport and you don't have a bomb, but somehow when you go through security, you get real nervous, like in case you have a bomb or drugs you didn't know you had? Or does anyone else do that? Like psychotic as I go through airport security. Anyway, my other downfall is I often wear a big baggy jumper, so then obviously they think I need to be searched as a whole thing. But in clinical practice, I think this shows up for me quite a bit actually, or certainly a younger version of me, it really showed up all the time. And I remember there was particular consultants that used to make me feel like this. So like just like your driving analogy, I would be in my, I was a very capable registrar, like renal trainee, very capable. I was decisive. I had it sorted out. I was thorough. Like the consultants really trusted me to look after the patients. It was really, I was very capable. But there was this one particular consultant who used to come, and it was so funny. His name was Adam Headley. Hi, Adam. I don't think you listen to this podcast. Anyway, but he is lovely. He's so non-threatening. But there was just something about his energy. Like when he came for a ward round with me, I think I must have got in my head, like I just thought he was thinking something. He had this kind of like disappointed dad energy, and he would just listen real quietly to what I was saying and not give me a lot of feedback to let me know I was on track. So I sort of got in my own head and started to spiral. And then what would happen is like I would just be a different person. Like I was clumsy, like I would drop things and then I would go to pick up the thing I dropped and then I would drop another thing. And I just looked at this kind of like calamity disaster register, which was not who I was. And it was like every time he was near me, this would happen. And it was so funny. So I think when you're talking about your police story, I mean, it's a kind of a funny example, but I know that that must have been because something in me was worried about what he was thinking about me, or if I was doing a good job or whatever. And I don't know what it was about him that just made me do that. But I can think of several examples like that. And when we were doing a little brainstorm before we came on here, you made a really great point, Becc, about when we were in clinic, for example, and maybe you're in one of those clinics where you're all just picking up patients. And then at the end of clinic, you'll sit down together and you'll talk about the patients. So then you're thinking, oh, like I need to see X, Y, Z amount of patients because I don't want to have shame when I get to the audit and I've only seen a couple or whatever. So there's these extra pressures, like you start to behave in a certain way based on what you're worried about people thinking about you and policing you, I guess. Like there's an expectation and this sort of measurement that you're in. So I think it's very relevant to the clinical environment. Do you have any other examples from clinical practice as well?
Yeah, I'm just even thinking about the exam situation. Like when you're doing a clinical exam and you've practiced your clinical exam skills to the nth degree. You've potentially done like multiple excellent pass-worthy practices by the time you get there. Yet you come to the clinical exam and you've got this panel of police in front of you who in your mind you're like, they're going to tell me I'm doing it wrong. They're going to see that I'm doing this all wrong. Am I doing something wrong? You've got the police there and suddenly you start acting weird. Like you say, you come to that consultant and you start dropping things and you're like, I swear I haven't dropped a thing in like 18 months. I haven't dropped a thing since I was a child, and suddenly I'm incompetent I have no grip strength. My dexterity's gone out the window. Can't even pick it up again. Like me when I was driving, I was like, because I was suddenly trying to think about something that I don't usually think about, I was like, which one's the brake pedal? Which one's the accelerator? And when I had to consciously think about it, I actually couldn't work it out. I had to put my feet down and be like, which one feels right? Which one would I usually use subconsciously to when I want to brake? Because it's not something you think about. And so when you start to be hyper vigilant, when you start to put too much attention onto things, you're trying to use neural pathways that are very rusty because they're usually subconscious. And I love, and I think it's hilarious the way they act weird, but then also it's important for us to actually really land on that reality that it makes us act weird, because sometimes it's not funny. Sometimes you really don't want to act weird. Like in your exam setting.
Yeah, and the exam is a perfect thing. I'm obviously very conscious of the fact that I'm obsessed with the clinical exam at the moment, but it's so true. This exact thing happens. You walk in and there's people staring at you, and the examiners are told, don't give anything away, right? So they've got this weird facade thing on where they're not allowed to show you emotion. I mean, some of them are very kind and kind of, some of them take that job very seriously in terms of not giving much away, which that's for me, that makes me fall apart. I'm so built into like look for little facial expressions to let me know I'm on track, and I think everyone is. Yeah, you can act totally weird, and it's like once you start acting weird, also the fact that you're acting weird, then you get in your head about that, right? It's like it's exhausting. There's a cycle that happens.
Yeah, it just adds to the evidence of I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing you touched on there is the amount of energy this takes as well. Like something that was so subconscious that you didn't have to put any energy into suddenly becomes this big exhausting activity for you. And so it's unpleasant in so many ways. And I guess that's the clinical environment as well. But I know that this shows up in social situations as well. I think we've talked about it before on the podcast where like if you have this, I can see how this could show up as a kind of a social anxiety. Like if you're networking or you're in a situation where you're trying to make new friends and you're sort of your consciousness goes to, oh God, am I behaving right? Like, what are people thinking of me? Or what should I say here? What should I say there? And you're very hypervigilant and guarded. And so you're not necessarily being authentic, which again is so exhausting, but it's also detrimental to other opportunities there, right? You could have great friends that you make because you're being authentic. You could have like amazing like other relationships that are more networky, but otherwise you can be stealing something from yourself by behaving in this way. So I think one of our goals really today was to talk about one, because it's kind of funny, but I think once you bring it to top of mind, these things are always really great to have there, because it means that when you do see it come up in your own life, you can then sort of pivot, right? You can be like, oh God, I'm doing that thing that Becc and Kristeen were talking about. Oh, maybe I can change the situation. Whereas when that was happening to me, it was just this big mystery. I was like, what is it about me dropping stuff with this consultant? Why am I such a weirdo in front of this consultant? And I never really got to the bottom of it ever. And I feel like if I had this podcast to listen to, I might have been able to sort of change my patterns of behavior. And Becc, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening more on that thought wizard vibe?
Yeah. Because this I can use the example in my life of this showing up in social situations. So when we're asking you guys that question, which is who are the police in your life, or where are the police in your life? The question is really asking where in your life, or who in your life makes you ask the question, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Or more to the point, am I doing this wrong? Am I doing something wrong here? And, for me, I still have this question crop up for me in social situations, because the version of doing it wrong for me is if I was to offend somebody or exclude somebody, if I was to disagree with somebody or express my opinion that is hurtful to them. I guess that fits in with offensive too. So in that way, when I go into social situations, I have police there too. I have those police that have those three consequences of A, they make me act weird, or depending on the context, they make you less competent, right? And, you can see how in a social situation, if I am editing what I say, as you suggested, Kristeen, like I'm trying to be less of myself, or not naturally myself, not express myself, in order to try and not offend anybody possibly, or exclude anybody possibly. That's going to make me act less competent as a sort of social person, just make me act a bit weird compared to my normal self, trying to do that calculation of editing in my head as well and predicting what everybody's thinking. The second consequence of expending a lot of energy, like just think about the mental load of having to consider all of those possibilities at the same time as interacting with other people, and you potentially being just vulnerable and open yourself as well. With that too, it's not just the mental load of doing that takes your energy, but it's also the fear that it creates. When you're asking the question, when you're constantly asking the question and being hyper vigilant of, am I doing something wrong? Am I about to do something wrong with the police around? It's like in the car, I was sitting there with so much tension up in my rigid, perfect posture, because my nervous system was on. Like my body was mobilizing energy. And also I was then expending energy to try and push down that fear, because I don't want to feel fear. I don't want to feel that feeling. So my body's resisting back against that and trying to be like, calm down, just relax, drive well. I've got fear, and then I'm trying to push it down with calm. That's an energy spend too. So that happens in, social situations for me as well, if I'm in this mode. And then thirdly, the opportunity cost as the third consequence. Me, when I was relaxed, natural, when I was not asking the question, am I doing something wrong in the car? I was like I was saying, I was singing, I was listening to audiobooks, I was learning, I was having a wonderful time. I used to actually be somebody who really didn't like driving. Now I've come to love driving, because I love the way that it kind of engages you to a certain extent, in sort of a physical task, and then it has that effect of almost like when you come up with ideas in the shower, because you're kind of occupied, but then there's a bit of your brain that can just kind of wander. I have that kind of effect driving too. So driving is actually like this precious, amazing opportunity for me now too. And while my brain was totally occupied with worrying about, am I doing it wrong? Are the police going to find me doing something wrong? I missed out on that too. Same with the social opportunities. As you were saying, while I'm policing myself, while I'm trying to edit myself, and while I'm trying to suppress my fear so that it doesn't boil up and become this difficult to manage thing, I don't get to relax into myself and express myself. I'm editing my opinion, so I don't get to say what I really think. And therefore, what I want to do is not necessarily to please and placate everybody. That's not actually necessarily what I want. What I want to do is attract and repel the people that I'm supposed to attract and repel, with all my unique little quirks and things. That's just my own personal value and desire. But the point is that while I'm doing this, while I'm making them the police, while the police are here, I'm not doing what I want to do. I'm missing out on that, acting in that value for myself. So yeah, there's a significant cost to allowing there to be police in your life. And in those three ways, you can see how your mind not only has to work so much harder in your thoughts and emotions, but you also can't show up in the way that you want to show up if you're allowing your thoughts and emotions to just act within your integrity.
Yeah. And you said so much in there. Well, first of all, I was thinking about my own experience of like a social event where there's lots of small talk and lots of people that I really don't know on any kind of level, even a superficial level. And I'm just literally thinking about how I always feel really drained after that, and I always feel uncomfortable in the moment. And I think they do too. I think there's a two-way this situation happening, and it's pretty exhausting, but also you don't necessarily like, you go home and you're like, I didn't get to know anyone, they didn't get to know me, everyone was being really careful. It's actually a really interesting thing. I wonder if someone just said at the start of any social event, right, everybody, guard down, like everyone just be yourselves. We'd have a great night, because I actually do love getting in amongst it. I love getting to know people, but I think sometimes if someone's not really, you can just tell that barrier's up and you're not allowed to go past it.
That really resonates with me, totally resonates with me. And I still have those situations where, this isn't something that I've yet made unconsciously competent all the time. It's something that I still am working on with my mind management work. And sometimes I will just show up to a situation not putting myself in the right space of mind, and I'll just do that. I'll stay really superficial, and I'll think that it's easier for me to do that, to just let the police be there and then to act in my safe zone. But I don't realize, as you're saying, I don't realize in the moment that actually it's taking me a lot of energy. And it's also taking away that stuff, as you're saying, that actually creates a lot of energy for me. Like if I was to dive in and connect with somebody, that would make me feel more alive. That would make me feel more energetic. So kind of going with this error in thinking that like, oh, I'm gonna let the police be here. I'm gonna stay superficial and keep myself safe. But actually, it's that false safety that actually steals a lot more than me, rather than the true safety of I'm going to show up in my integrity and I'm going to do what feels right to me. And if you know, if something goes wrong along the way, I've got my own back, and we'll go from there. And it really makes me think too how I actually, in the same way I didn't used to enjoy driving at all, because I would drive with that extra layer, that extra weight on me as well, of like, I don't like driving. I have to focus so much. I just had a lot of tension, I think. I didn't want to be driving. It was a waste of time in my mind. So I resisted and resented that I was driving. And throughout the drive, I was just wasting all this energy. Same with the social situations. When you make something take a lot of energy and be exhausting, you're also going to not enjoy it as much, are you? You're not going to get as much out of it.
No, but the thing that you keep saying is the word allow. Like you said, you allow the police to be there. And I think that is so true, because when this stuff's top of mind, it does become a choice, right? So you're allowing other people's perception of you or rules that you think are in place or whatever to affect your behavior in the moment. And of course, it might not be conscious at the start, but now that we've had this episode, you'll all be well aware of what you're up to these days. So understanding that it is a choice for the police to be there, or even coming back to that consultant I had, like past me would have loved to have heard this. So that maybe the solution, and I'm keen to hear how, because you talked about at the start about how we can feel safe in ourselves. But I wonder, if past me would have responded to, maybe before ward rounds with that consultant being like, am I happy with the management plan that I've set? Am I happy with how I'm showing up today? And the answer would probably have been yes. And so, or it could do some tweaking, or I'm sure there's always room to improve. But what I mean is, I'm sure I could have created personal safety for myself, understood I had my own back, understood that I was proud of what I was doing and I was happy enough. And obviously this consultant is someone I can learn from and ask them questions and all of that, and get the things that I need from them on the ward round for patient care. Like if I had that mindset before that ward round started, maybe I would have behaved differently. Maybe not. Maybe I would still have been a complete hot mess. I don't know. But I like to think that there is a solution to this problem. And then once we make it top of mind, we can create that personal safety for ourselves. So I guess just to finish, Becc, I was curious, obviously personal safety is like something that you unpack and you do actual coaching with people one-on-one and in groups so that they can feel this. But just for the people listening, what would your advice be on in these scenarios? If you feel like you are behaving weird in a scenario, how can people get to feel safe today? What would you suggest?
That process that you went through when you were like, how would you actually just asked yourself the question, how would I feel safe in this scenario? How could I feel safe in this scenario with this consultant? And you came up with a few solutions that surely would have been individualized to you. And going through that exact process is exactly what we need you to do to create safety, because it's just not a one size fits all. Those solutions that you came up with, because you came up with them, were probably answering specific pain points for you, as opposed to, asking yourself, even saying, what advice would you give to somebody else who feels unsafe? Oh, just take a deep breath. Oh, just remember that they were a trainee once too. Oh, just think that people don't think that much about you. Those kinds of answers, they're akin to positive thinking. They can actually do more detriment to us and our sense of safety than doing nothing at all, changing nothing at all. Because when we dismiss our fears like that, what that does is it breaks down our relationship with ourselves. It sends ourselves the message that our sense of unsafety, our fears will be ignored. They'll be dismissed. Your body can send you signals saying something is wrong, we're not okay, we're unsafe. And you will sweep in with your positive thinking and say, shush, we don't care. We're going to keep doing this anyway. We're going to keep doing this despite the fact that you're unsafe, that you're under threat. And it is, as I said, it's worse than doing nothing. It's worse than continuing as you are, to break down that relationship of trust that you have with yourself. So the answer is to find personalized solutions. And to do that, we need to actually spell out what the problem is for all of us as individuals first too. So we need to actually understand, what is our nervous system perceiving in this situation to be the threat, to make us unsafe? When you get clear about the problem, then the solution becomes a lot more obvious. And sure, sometimes the solution doesn't come quickly. And probably 50% of the work has to go to actually building that self-awareness, because the stuff that, if I asked you that question first and I said, what is making you feel unsafe? The first answer you gave me probably isn't the heart of it. We probably need to feel safe and patient enough and hold enough space for you to dig a couple levels deeper to really meet the unsafety. So spelling out the actual problem, the actual thing that's making you feel unsafe is the first part of the problem. And then finding solutions is the next part. And finding solutions does require, again, it's not like the first answer that you come up with is necessarily the answer, but it's doing those experiments on yourself to see what actually makes you feel different. So with all of that being said, if you are in this situation where you recognize you have any of those three consequences, you see the police are here, so you're acting weird or incompetent. So when you're actually usually competent, you're expending a lot of energy, you're coming home from these situations, and even though nothing particularly went wrong, you're feeling exhausted, you're feeling tired, or it's not filled up, you're feeling a bit depleted. The end of a clinical day is a good example of that. Or 3, you notice there's a big opportunity cost. Like, you showed up, you went to the event, you didn't feel like that there was that much of an energy cost or whatever, but still you're like, I could have been bigger and bolder and braver, or just more of myself in that situation. If you're noticing any of these 3 things, then we want you to turn to yourself and ask yourself, do you feel unsafe here? Don't answer the question once. Go a couple levels deeper for yourself. Then, when you feel like you've hit on something that makes you feel uncomfortable, when you find the thing that makes you feel unsafe, you will feel it in your body. Putting attention on that you will feel a reaction in your body. So that's when you know that it's going to feel bad, but you're in a good place there. You're getting to the money. Now, commit to doing an experiment to figure out what could make you feel safer in that moment. Just an experiment. Probably not going to get it right the first time. Maybe you will, but let it be an experiment and just try things on. Let this be just one really specific small part of your life. Don't try and take on anything, because as you do this with one thing in your life and you learn more about yourself, that's going to apply to other places in your life too. So nothing is too small to start with. Does that sound like a good system to start with, Kristeen?
It does. And I think it's kind of funny, because I feel like also just giving yourself permission to show up messily, because I think with what you're saying, it sounds like a really great approach once it's happened. But I think it's probably best to handle it once you have shown up weird, and then be like, what happened there? As opposed to trying to live your life in this perfect, like, unmessy way. It's all right. Happens to all of us. That's why we're sharing the story. So I think that's super, super helpful, Becc. And I love that feeling of creating that personal safety. And only good things happen from there. The last example that I thought of that I just thought was going to be funny for everyone is the first date experience, because that happens on first date. Do you know, or maybe not even saying that. Have you ever really liked someone and then you start to act real weird? Like, my thing is that I don't take in enough air to finish my sentence, and then I'll like speak, but it all sounded really squeaky. And you ever done that? Anyway, just thought I'd share.
I don't even want to think back to like all of my experiences as a med student where the police were everywhere. Everyone was the police when I was a med student. Every single person was the police in my life. And oh my gosh, I would have been so weird. Don't even make me think about it.
It gets better from there. That's right. The trauma's real. Yeah. But yeah, and I think there's also responsibility on the other side. I think you know, there's sort of the more you get into leadership positions, you can probably see this in your junior staff as well. And you can see when someone else is having one of those moments, even with you or whatever. So there's an opportunity there to soothe on the other side of things as well. But you know, I really love this conversation, Becc. It was so fun. And if you are free on the 12th of May, what do you need to do? You need to sign up for the Dear Darling party. We'll leave the link below. We cannot wait to hang out with you.
How dare you, darling, while feeling safe.
Well, feeling safe. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in the crowd.
Hey, yeah. Yeah.